Chapter 167, An Arrival at the Wharf. The collision was so powerful that the buffer's wife was thrown from her seat, and every plank in the ferry oscillated with a crashing sound. The buffer and the resurrection man rushed upon the deck. A single glance enabled them to ascertain the cause of the alarm. A lighter, nearly as large as the ferry and heavily laden, had been so clumsily brought in against the barges moored off the wharf that it came with the whole weight of its broadside upon the ferry. "Now then, stupids," said the buffer, applying this complimentary epithet to the two men who were on the deck of the lighter which was putting in. "Hope we haven't hurt you, friends," exclaimed one of the individuals thus addressed. "More harm might have been done," answered the buffer. "Who are you?" "The Blossom," was the reply. "Where'd you come from?" demanded Wicks. "Oh, up above the bridge," cried the man, speaking in a surly and evasive manner. "Here, just catch hold of this rope, will you, and let us lay alongside of you." "No, no," shouted the buffer. "You'd better drop astern of us and moor alongside that chalk barge." "Well, so we will," said the man. While the Blossom was executing this maneuver, which it did in a most clumsy manner, as if the two men that worked her had never been entrusted with the care of a lighter before, the buffer turned towards the resurrection man and said in a whisper, "We must remain outside all the barges, 'cause of having room to run our boat alongside the ferry and get things on board easy when we come back from the expedition down to the Lady Anne." "To be sure," answered the resurrection man. "You did quite right to make those lubbers get lower down. I'm pleased with you, Jack, and now I see that I can let you be spokesman on all such occasions without any fear that you'll commit yourself." "Why, if you want to keep in the background as much as possible, Tony," cried the buffer, "it's much better to trust these little things to me. But I say, I think there's something odd about them chaps that have just put in here." "So do I," said Tidkins. "They certainly know no more about managing a lighter than you and I did when we first took to it." "Yes, but we had a regular man to help us at the beginning," observed the buffer. "So we had, and I precious soon sent him about his business when he had taught us our own." "Well, perhaps them fellows have got a regular man too," said Wicks. "But let him be what and who they will, my idea is that they have taken to the same line as ourselves." "We must find that out, Jack," observed the resurrection man. "If they're what you think, they will of course be respected. If they don't belong to the same class, we must ascertain what they've got on board and then make up our minds whether any of their cargo will suit us." "Well said," returned the buffer. "But in any case, you must be the person to learn all this," continued the resurrection man. "You see, I'm so well known to a lot of different people that would show me no mercy if they got hold of me that I'm compelled to keep myself as quiet as possible. There's Markham, there's Cranky Jem, there's the Zingarees, and there's the Rattlesnake. Why, if I was only to be twigged by one of them, I should have to make myself scarce in a minute." "I know all this, Tony," cried the buffer impatiently, "and therefore the less you're seen about, the better. In the daytime, always keep below as you have been doing, but at night, when one can't distinguish particular faces, you can take the air, or on such occasions as tomorrow will be, for instance, when we run down the river and get away from London." Yes, interrupted Tidkins. "Don't think that I shall throw away a chance. Those lubbers have managed to make their lighter fast to the chalk barge now. Just step across and try and find out what you can about them." The buffer immediately proceeded to obey this order. He walked across the barges, which, as we before stated, were so closely moored together that they formed one vast floating pier, and approaching as close as possible to the Blossom without setting foot upon it, he said, "Hello, friends there. You mustn't think that we meant anything by telling you not to lay alongside us. 'Twas only 'cause we expect to be off tomorrow or next day." "No offense is taken where none's intended," answered the man who had spoken before. "You seem well laden," said the buffer after a pause. "Yes, pretty deep," answered the first speaker. "Do you discharge here at Mossop's?" "Don't know yet," was the laconic reply. "And what may be your freight?" "Bales of cotton," returned the man. "Then I suppose you're the master of that lighter?" continued Buffer. "Yes," was the brief answer. "Well, it's a pleasant life," observed Wicks. "Have you been at it long?" "I've only just begun," replied the master. "And that gentleman there?" said the buffer with a laugh. "I should think he's not a Johnny Raw on the water." "Not quite," returned the master. "Poor fellow, he's deaf and does not speak." "Huh," replied the buffer. "Well, perhaps that's convenient in more ways than one." "I believe you," said the master significantly. "Oh, I thought so," cried Wicks, who now felt convinced that the Blossom was not a whit better than the ferry. "And there ain't no one on board but you and the other fellow?" "What the devil should we want any more hands for?" said the master gruffly. "Oh, I understand," observed the buffer. "Capital. You're the master to do as you like. The other's deaf and doesn't speak and therefore can't blab, and you and him are alone on board. I've hit it, you see." "You're uncommon sharp, my fine feller," said the master, stepping on board. "And wash your mouth out." The buffer did not hesitate to accept this invitation. The other man had lighted his pipe and was lounging on the deck at the after cabin. The master disappeared down the hatchway of the small cabin or cuddy forward, and in a few moments he returned with a bottle and 2 tin pannikins. "What's the name of your craft?" he said, as he poured out the liquor, which exhaled the strong and saccharine flavor of rum. "The Fairy," replied the buffer. "Then here's a health to the Fairy, and here's to the Blossom." The master and the buffer each took draughts of the raw spirit. "Now let us drink to your better acquaintance," said the master. "You seem an honest, open-hearted kind of fella." "And to be trusted, too," interrupted Wicks. "Well, I'm inclined to think you are," said the master, speaking deliberately, as if he were meditating upon some particular idea which then occupied his mind. "And it's very probable, it may be, I mean, that I shall want a little of your advice, for which, remember, I should be happy to pay you well." "You couldn't apply to a better man," returned the buffer. "And here's to you," said the master. "What sort of fellow is Mossop that keeps this wharf?" "He has no eyes, no ears, and no tongue for things that don't concern him," answered Wicks. "Just the kind of agent I want," returned the master. "But I shall also require 2 or 3 good fellers in a few days, chaps that ain't over particular, you understand, how they earn a 10-pound note, so long as it's sure." "And you want 2 or 3 chaps of that kind?" asked the buffer. "Yes, I've a good thing in hand," returned the master, "but I shan't say too much now." "Well, you may reckon on me at any moment. Tomorrow accepted, said Wicks, "and my pal in the Fairy will also be glad to row in the same boat." "What sort of man is your pal?" demanded the master. "One of the right kind?" "If he wasn't, him and I shouldn't hold long together," answered the buffer. "But when do you think you'll want our services?" "Very soon. You say you're both engaged for tomorrow?" "Yes, both of us." "The day after tomorrow in the evening, you and your friend can come and smoke your pipes with me, and we'll talk the matter over," said the master. "And if anything should prevent us coming the day after tomorrow, the evening after that will do, perhaps," remarked the buffer interrogatively. "Well, we must make that do, then," answered the master. "Good night." "Good night," said Wicks, and he then returned to the Fairy. "What can you make of them, Jack?" demanded the Resurrection Man, who was smoking his pipe on the after deck. "They're of the right sort, Tony," was the reply. "The master seems a good, kind feller. The only other man on board with him is deaf and does not speak. The master sounded me about Mossop, and that shows that he knows what he's about. Besides, he hinted that he's a good thing in view, but wanted more hands, so he made an appointment for you and me to smoke a pipe with him in the course of 2 or 3 evenings to talk over the matter." "You didn't say much about me?" exclaimed the Resurrection Man hastily. "Not more than was proper. It's all right. I could tell that with half an eye." "Well, business seems dropping in upon us," observed the Resurrection Man, "but we must be very cautious what we do. And now let's turn in, for we have to get up early, recollect." Okay, so they've met another couple of people running a ship who are probably also river pirates, who are going to set them up with some kind of a job. We don't know what it is yet. They seem a little bit fishy, but who knows? The buffer and the Resurrection Man and maybe Maul are going to go undertake some kind of dangerous mission involving getting not stolen goods, but goods off of a ship that's run aground. So we'll see what's happening. All right, see you for the next chapter.